My dad died, and then we had to do something with the building. I was in school. My mother didn't want to run it, so we hired a manager, Fred Huff. Fred used to be a bartender, manager at Jenkins Pool Room, which is just near the Indiana Theater, and we hired him as our manager. So he ran Nick's from then on. He became ill. He eventually died, and that's about the time we made that transition from Hrisomalos to Barn.
When I graduated in 1952, I was leaving town and I passed the city limits, and I looked back and I said, well, that's the last time I'll ever be in Bloomington. Yeah, I had a feeling right then, you're making a mistake.
Dick Barnes was a dapper, young, well-dressed, handsome fella who buddied with another fellow who was a dapper, well-dressed, handsome young fella.
I was working for Russ Curry at the time at Curry Bookstore. We became very good friends, he and his wife Terry, and he said, what are you going to do now? What will you be doing? I said, well, I don't know, I'll go back to Richmond. And he said, well, you figure out something to do. He said, live in Bloomington. He said, it's a great college town, you'll love it. I started the pizzeria down the street in 1953 and 4. So I'd known this really good Italian family, great friends back in Richmond. And they served me my first pizza in their home. Mm-hmm. And it was so new to me. And they said, well, in this week's Saturday Evening Post, I think, was a magazine. And they said there's an article in there about this man in New York City named Frank Mastro who builds pizza ovens. And came up with the idea, said, well, let's go to New York City and talk with him. And he actually had a package. He'd sell a dough maker, a pizza oven, and pans and pots and counters. And I went with Bill Ringenberg at the time. He and I became partners in the Café Pizzaria. And we lasted for a few months as partners. And it just didn't work out. So I took it over by myself.
Did you know Al Cobain in Richmond?
Yeah, yes. Al and I were good friends. Yeah, in fact, well, that was his band that was Dominic Spera. Mm-hmm. And the band went to Russell's Point, Ohio.
When I first heard of Dick Barnes was in 1956. Al Cobain band, we did a dime a dance routine in Lima, Ohio. Dick Barnes then had the pizzeria, and he then sent someone up to sell pizza while we were playing.
I rented an oven, and we just went from there. And I just put a little pizza stand together inside this dance hall.
It rained every day. It was the rainiest season in the history of Ohio, and it just chased people out of the amusement park, so no one came to the pavilion to dance. The Cobains lost an inordinate amount of money. I ended up as a grocery clerk in the local IGA, and of course Dick Barnes did very well. He sold pizza and turned out very nicely for him.
We used to buy pizza from Dick, and he'd deliver it down to Nick's, and we'd dispose of it at the tables. Yeah, it was a nice relationship. He was great.
Closed the pizzeria one night. This was 1957, and went up the street to Nick's to have a beer. It was late at night, probably midnight, between midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning, and I walked in, and Dr. Frank Hrisomolas was there. He was, of course, he wasn't, well, he was a doctor, of course, but he was still interning.
But I said, Dick, I need to talk to you. So he came up, and I said, you want to buy Nick's? And he said, yes.
His mother was working, Katina, and she was really a typical hardworking Greek immigrant. Mm-hmm. Just that's what she did, work. I
think my mother loved Dick better Well, she loved me. She was really, really attached to him, and he was very good to her, and she really liked him.
And he said, I've sure got to figure out a way to get Mom out of here. And he says, the only way I'll get her out of here is to sell it. And I perked up and I says, well, probably now's not the time to talk business, but I'd sure like to talk business. I think I could do it. He said, I would suggest you, if we're going to get serious, that you talk to my accountant. That'd be the where to start. And I said, okay, who's your accountant? He said, Joe Keogh. And I said, well, that's a real coincidence. He's my accountant too.
And I said, my purpose in life is to keep Nick's going, and I'll do anything I can with these numbers to make it easy for you.
We figured it out, and Joe says, Keogh, the accountant, said, well, let's make him an offer. He said, I think I'd like to see you get it, and we're already set up for accountant-wise. And so I did, and Dr. Frank says, well, let me talk about it with my mother, and we talked a couple of days later. He says, that's a lot more than we were expecting.